Thanks for tuning into the Minimis podcast. Today we have the pleasure of once again hosting Diana Bryant, Officer of the Order of Australia, former Chief Justice of the Family Court of Australia, former inaugural Chief Federal Magistrate, graduate of Melbourne Law School and former Judge in Residence at Melbourne Law School, and birdwatcher.
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for being on the show, Diana.
Pleasure.
Birdwatching, how did you get into it?
My husband Richard got into it first, just sort of fell into it a bit, and then got quite interested, and I tagged along for a while, not being terribly interested, but we can all remember, I think, our first sort of experience that really got us into it, and I know mine was at the beach somewhere, and there were a whole lot of birds on a beach, white birds on the beach, which I had always thought were all silver gulls. I put the binoculars on and I discovered there were at least 4 different sorts of birds, and that for me was the sort of wow moment.
So you would have been looking at terns, presumably?
Terns, I think there was sanderling.
Oh wow, yeah, I'm still...
Maybe 2 different sorts of terns, sanderling.
Yeah. Still hunting for sanderling. And so when was that?
Oh, that would have been about 1986.
Wow, so a fairly long career in birdwatching so far. Very good. And you've recently returned from a trip overseas which involved some birdwatching.
Yes.
So where were you and what did you see?
I was in Canada and then I was in the US. Didn't see as many birds as we'd like. I think I got 2 lifers though during the trip. One was Kirtland's warbler and the other was the upland sandpiper.
Very good. And for those listening at home, the uninitiated, a lifer means it's the first time you've seen the species. So this is all very new for de minimis listeners, I think.
Yes.
And that's a good segue. I guess birdwatching is one of those hobbies where when you tell people you're into birdwatching, they either, their eyes glaze over or they raise an eyebrow. So I guess I wonder, are you on I guess I picture the birdwatching spectrum as Twitter on one end and sort of recreational birdwatcher on the other end, who maybe has a pair of binoculars and a field guide. Yeah. Where on that spectrum or continuum would you place yourself?
I'm towards the Twitcher end.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I mean, I like to find new birds. We don't tend to drive to North Queensland overnight because someone's seen something rare there.
Yep.
An Arctic warbler's arrived unexpectedly. We tend not to do that, which is the far end of the spectrum of being a twitcher. But I like to see as many birds as I can. I also like to see new birds.
Very good. Speaking of vagrants, did you hear about the rose starling that's shown up just south of Newcastle?
I didn't.
Yeah, it was posted on Facebook in the Australian Bird ID page.
It would be nice.
Yeah, it's up on Aramea.
Presumably from Indonesia.
It was the first time I'd ever heard of a rose starling.
Yeah, they have rose starlings in Indonesia, so I imagine that's where it's come from.
Yeah, it just looked to me like an odd Indian myna. Yeah, very similar. So you would place yourself closer to that twitcher end. Are there any twitchers that you have been on? I mean, are there any species that you did travel to chase down?
I don't think I've ever travelled enormous distances. I can remember driving down to see a penguin. I'm trying to think which one it was now. One of a Fiordland penguin, I think, which was down at Warrnambool. So I drove down to see that. But no, I haven't got on a plane and gone anywhere.
Did you get the tufted duck earlier this year?
Yes, got the tufted duck. Went down to... was it Werribee, wasn't it? It was a sewage plant. Yeah, saw the tufted duck.
But you would have seen plenty of them in Europe.
I've seen lots of tufted ducks, particularly in Geneva.
I imagine so. I was very bitter because I got my key and permit for the plant the day before I left to go to Hobart for a month. And of course, when I got back, the duck had gone. Yeah. So birdwatching takes people to some pretty weird places. Werribee, for example. So for those at home, Werribee is a sewage treatment plant out near Avalon Airport. Where are some of the places that birdwatching has taken you? Some of the odd places? Sewage ponds all over the world, which is really odd. I mean, odd for people listening to this, I guess, but for birders, it's just it's bread and butter.
It's bread and butter, absolutely. Yeah. Because all sorts of really good birds are in sewage ponds. For those who might wonder why, traditionally sewage ponds had they're settling ponds and they've got lots of nutrients in them, so there's lots of food for birds to graze and feed on.
Aside from sewage farms?
Just interesting countries. I've been to lots of countries in Africa. I've been to South America, Asia, parts of Europe, North America, quite a bit of birding in North America.
Wow, very lucky. So, are there any places in Australia that you would never have been to if it weren't for bird watching?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, especially the outback. Done lots of outback trips, and I really love going to the outback now, looking for birds, trying to find things I might not have seen. Not too many birds I haven't seen, but looking for the ones I haven't is really good fun. And it's just, one of the things about birding, which you would know, is that it gives you a completely different perspective on the habitat. I mean, things that you wouldn't notice or think about all of a sudden become quite important because you're looking for a particular kind of bird that lives in that particular kind of habitat. So I'm thinking sort of about grass wrens, for example, out in the desert. So you're looking for tufts of spinifex grass where you might see grass wrens. And I mean, prior to my interest in birding, I would have thought that spinifex was just boring.
And have you ticked off all the grass wrens?
Not since they've split them, and I hadn't ticked them before then. Probably the black grass wren is my nemesis.
Right.
We all have a nemesis, I think.
Yeah. And have you picked up a grey falcon in your time in the outback?
I haven't seen a grey falcon either.
Right. Well, not many have. So yeah. So I guess the birdwatching world, for those listening at home, is a very strange place. It's full of very welcoming and helpful people, but also people tend to be aloof and wary, in my experience. I think it's a world for misfits, oddballs, nature lovers, the detail-oriented. And so without sort of going too far off track, has that been true in your experience? What are some...
Yes, but I would add to that, I entirely agree with that, I would add to that quite normal people who are interested in birding. What happens with us, perhaps because my husband Richard puts information onto the net about offering birding services, and he takes people to Werribee quite often. And he would get, in spring and summer, lots of international birders would contact him maybe 12 months ahead of coming and say that they're coming and this is their itinerary, and tee it up with him to go out with him, takes them to there, takes them to the Yuyangs, takes them other places. And often they're couples, and quite often we'll have an email exchange and they'll come and stay with us. So we often have people staying for a night or two. And generally we've made some really good friends out of that, and not misfits and strange people.
Sonia and Christian, for example.
Sonia and Christian,
and
for
Runa,
example.
of course.
Yeah, and a couple that we had a couple of years ago who are quite keen skiers, as are we, and they met up with us last year in Utah and skied with us, and we're going to ski with them in Colorado next year. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess that's a bit of a return on all the work that Richard's put in, offering his services to people. It's fantastic. So, I'll never forget the first time I saw an orange-bellied parrot. That was probably the most special bird-watching moment I've ever had. Are there any sightings like that stick out for you?
Look, I think our orange-bellied parrot probably the same. I remember going down to Werribee with an American, I think, who just arrived, and so we had him in the car, and we thought we saw an orange-bellied parrot, so all of a sudden the car came to a screeching halt, doors flew open, and we sort of threw ourselves out and appeared at this bird, and he said something like, I guess that's an interesting bird.
Wow. Yeah. Obviously not knowing that they have a wild population of about 50. They're one of the world's most rare birds, and one of the most endangered. So, and it was lost on him.
It was lost on him. But he did appreciate that it was important.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. That's good. He probably would have been just as happy to see a blue-winged parrot.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. And for those listening at home, they look very similar. I've been very lucky over the past month or so. I've been out to Werribee 3 times and had 4 OBP sightings. So
that's great.
Very lucky.
That's
there was a flock of 9 the other day.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh, it's good to hear there's 9 around.
Yeah. And a flock of 7 yesterday. So
terrific. Nice. Oh, that's good.
Now, bird watching can be a dangerous pastime. My dad's fallen in a ditch in WA and broken an ankle before. Have you ever come unstuck?
I most certainly have, and I've recently come to call my injuries. It's 2 of them really. The curse of the white-quilled rock pigeon.
Oh dear!
Because on each occasion I've just seen a white-quilled rock pigeon. So the first, most famous time, we were looking for a black grass wren, which is why it's still my nemesis bird, up in the Kimberley, and we'd been looking out with some friends that we were with, seen a white-quilled rock pigeon for the first time then. and they'd gone back to have breakfast, and Richard and I decided we'd go skinny dipping in a rock pool. So we did that, and as I was just getting into the pool, he was just about to say, "Be careful, it's slippery," when I slipped, put my hand out, did a Colles fracture to my hand, which was all displaced, and then apparently sort of fainted and slipped into the water and almost drowned and had to be retrieved.
Well, good thing you've got a doctor for a
Yes,
husband.
yeah, he wasn't really terribly impressed, though.
No, I imagine he wasn't.
Sort of fainting, wet, naked woman.
Yeah, he's having
to be
pull
helped
from
back.
the pool.
Yeah, that's right.
And so in the Kimberley, you would have been pretty far from help.
Yeah, we had to then go back to Kununurra to get the wrist set, and we weren't able to go up to the Mitchell Plateau, so we weren't able to see the black grass wren, which we were looking for. When I was in the Kimberley a few months ago, actually a month or so ago, we went up to a spot where we thought there might be black grass wren, saw the white-quilled rock pigeon, and we're looking around, and I stepped onto a rock which I thought was firm, and it was slippery, and I crashed down again. This time, fortunately, I was holding my binoculars, so I didn't put my hand down. I just sort of crashed down and landed on my head, hit my head, which was much better really than breaking my wrist.
Yeah, yeah.
And wasn't really injured particularly,
Well,
other than being covered in mud and giving the guy who was bringing the boat up to us a terrible fright because he couldn't work out why I was lying on a rock next to the water where there were crocs.
At least it wasn't Phyllis spinifex.
Yeah, it wasn't a Phyllis spinifex.
Yeah, that would be bad. And I hope the bins are okay. They didn't.
Everything was fine.
Good. So I guess the black grass wren is your bogey bird.
It is definitely. But we think we saw it though.
Okay. Yeah.
North, again, interesting thing. It's been recorded around the Mitchell Plateau area, and we were on a boat with a helicopter on it, which was really nice, going further north in the northern gorges. And I thought it seemed to me that although it hadn't been reported there, the habitat was exactly the same as it. So I did a little bit of looking up, Googled, and found Graham Chapman, who's a photographer, had said he thought they were probably there, but not yet reported because people hadn't seen them. And one morning we thought we saw one. We had a probable sighting, but it was a long way away, and we just could, for a new bird to put on the life list, it was just a bit too far to be absolutely positive.
Any other bogey birds, or just that one?
The cassowaries was for ages.
Oh, really?
I've finally seen one.
That's
And cassowaries are huge.
Yeah, and I think they're often wandering around the beaches in the Daintree.
I've been everywhere where they were, and
Yep.
just could not see one. Eventually, a couple of years ago, I finally saw the cassowaries. So.
Very good. Well, that's an impressive bogey bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and was it an adult?
It was an adult.
An adult?
Yeah,
Not
with
at all
a
aggressive?
chick.
With
No.
a chick, right. Well, I guess you didn't get between them.
No, we didn't.
No, yeah. Cassowaries are very dangerous for those at home, those who don't know. Now, I guess we're living in a time of ecological uncertainty. Many species are leaving the planet, which is quite sad. So you've got species like the orange-bellied parrot, the regent honeyeater in Australia. And I see a future for birdwatching in the role of sort of educating people about ecology. Do you agree?
I completely
Would you
agree with that, because when you do introduce people to it who've not done it before, they become quite excited about it.
And they tend to get a deeper understanding of how complex the ecology is around them, and how important it is.
Yeah, and they start to again get an interest in different habitat and
the diversity
of
everything. That's very good. And I think you touched on it a bit earlier, but one of the best things about birdwatching for me is that once you sling the bins around your neck, you sort of forget about everything else.
Yes,
You're just
you do.
out there birdwatching.
Yeah, and you have to concentrate. I really enjoyed it when I was Chief Justice of the Family Court and really busy. I mean, it was probably the one thing for me that was relaxing, because when you're out there, first of all, trying to sight something and get your binoculars onto it and then work out what it is, you're just completely occupied.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing about birdwatching. It's, once you've got your birdwatching hat on, that's it. That's fantastic. Thank you for listening to the De Minimis podcast. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Diana Bryant for being our guest. And if you would like to get involved with the De Minimis podcast or write for us, please contact us at mlsdeminimis@gmail.com.